Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 19 of the Talking with Apes podcast. Today, we will be discussing the energy future of Europe. This conversation was sparked by the recent developments in Ukraine. So today, we will discuss how can we reduce our dependency on Russian gas and how can we do that in the most green way possible, because, of course, we are climate activists. We want Europe to act in a moment where they have to change things anyways as green as possible to ensure our future even after this conflict. Okay, let's jump into it, I would say.
Yes, let's do it. I think the first thing we need to set the tone of the conversation is where we are right now. Right now, today is the 19th of March, 2022. The situation in Ukraine is basically still the same since a week. The recent thing, if we want to talk energy, actually, like Russia went ahead and was like, hey, we actually are considering cutting Nord Stream 1. Nord Stream 1, for those who don't know, is the gas line that runs from Russia to Europe and supplies, depending on the country, a lot of natural gas.
For the Austrians, all of their national gas.
Yes, literally 100% of the Austrian.
Very little.
Yes, exactly. Worth to mention that Germany and Hungary, one of the bigger countries, are like
skittish because of this.
Yes, very skittish. They already came out and said last Monday, apparently, that they would not support sanctions from the European side. So that's why Russia is like, oh, so we can hurt them that way. So that's where we are right now. When it comes
Also,
on the other hand,
the Ukrainian energy network has been linked in minor ways with the European network right now. So in order to give the Ukrainians a backup in case more of their energy plants get hit, they are connected to the European production or to the European network, and thus also production. So energy could be sold to Ukraine in order to make sure that some lights stay on there and they have energy to do certain things, which, also, of course,
is a factor, but it's not that big of a factor.
No, but they sped up the process recently. It was always planned to happen, but it was sped up. It was with, of course, the necessary precautions that if a light bulb blows in Ukraine, it doesn't take out the entire European network.
Right now, reducing the dependency on Russian gas is a priority, as like Kadri Simpson, the European Commissioner for Energy, said. Reducing our dependence on Russian gas is a strategic imperative for the European Union. In recent years, we have already significantly diversified our supply, building LNG terminals and new interconnectors. But Russia's attack on Ukraine is a watershed moment. Next week, the commissioner will propose a pathway for Europe to become independent from Russia's gas as soon as possible. So I'm sorry for that little
that was most people zoned out in the middle of your sentence. I zoned out in the middle of your sentence. But basically, the European Union and the European leaders are very much like, hey, we probably should deal with this.
And also something that's maybe important to note, how are we dependent on this gas and why are we so dependent on this gas? Most of the gas is actually not used for light bulbs, as you said, but for heating buildings within Europe.
It's not mainly for electricity generation. It's actually a pretty small percentage of the whole thing, but it is significant.
Yeah, gas usage.
Mostly heating, yes.
50% of our gas is used for heating. So if we could make changes in that region, it would probably have like a bigger impact.
And we can, the majority of I believe a third of European housing can be made more energy efficient. So that would be a quick fix, of course, as well as some other little things like...
if you're jumping right away into solutions...
How can we make this happen?
Yeah, if you're jumping right away into solutions, one of the bigger things is, like you said, insulation for European houses. We just are not that efficient with our use of gas to warm our houses. It's very feasible to simulate the economy in a way. I don't know if you've we saw it just now when we were watching the news. Apparently, Italy had a program where they would
Yes.
encourage their citizens to build more insulated and more energy efficient heating systems in their houses, and the Italian government would pay you 110% back. So they will pay for the whole thing plus a 10% bonus.
Yes.
Something that actually worked pretty well, even though the whole thing was riddled with corruption.
Yeah, another thing that
That's
can
sweet.
be done is incentivizing things like a heat pump, which is a very efficient way, but quite expensive way to make a house independent.
Solar panels are still, like, if you're just talking in general, because you could make a way, like you could heat your water using electricity.
Of course, yes.
That's just like something that happens. Like
Yeah, the combination of a heat pump and solar panels would basically mean that you are completely fossil fuel free in your house.
well,
combine
depends
that-
on where the electricity comes from.
Combine that
Well,
with
if it comes
good
from your solar
architecture and
panels.
That wouldn't be
logical
enough.
production. Not always. So you also need to be, and that's the other main thing, plugged into a larger energy network.
Exactly.
Because, as Kenan says, if you are still getting energy from a fossil fuel, like a gas power plant, then less green. But solar panels are wonderful, as is wind energy or like water energy, like from turbines. But it only gets stable, or it gets more stable the larger the network. So the ideal thing would be to have a ginormous network of 10,000 millions of little producers and takers in all interconnected, so that you
We see small
have
scale
buffer.
projects like that for little towns that have a what do you call it exactly? A
Cooperative.
a cooperative energy source. Usually, like even the Belgian government actually offers you like that legal pathway of, if you have a little community, you can have.
Yes, they tend to be they are very popular in
They
recent
are.
years.
They are. It's a very economically incentivized thing by the government, but honestly, it's like, if you
Yeah.
want to talk about it, it's not the best implementation.
Also, the Belgian government, to be very specific for a brief second, has its own schemes in introducing those things.
Co-op
So-
thingies.
Yeah. There's one thing when you have a cooperative that buys energy or that produces energy and owns those windmills, etc. And then you have another thing when the energy cooperative just buys energy of a multinational company.
Exactly.
Which is kind of a paper construction that delivers an empty box in the end.
I actually don't understand what the fuck you're talking about.
It's a very specific thing. It's actually not worth going into much more. But the concept is renewable energy sources are inherently, by design, more decentralized
Yes.
than a nuclear power plant,
Yeah.
for example, or a gas power plant, or anything like that.
And we think it's like, if you centralize it a bit more often, like you said, a gigantic network that, like, if every house produced energy on its own using solar panels, it's better to maybe get this energy to a one center that would be one grid.
Actually, not a center. They should all be interconnected, so that, for example, when
You produce too much energy.
when a car is plugged in, you
Yeah.
can store energy.
Yeah.
You can store extra energy in from another building in that car, even if that is not owned by the same person. For example,
I mean, yeah, for
but
that
it
you
doesn't
would,
need to be centralized.
But you're talking a huge project now.
I mean,
well,
the thing is, it's not. It's like it wouldn't be that big of a problem if our current energy grid would be able to take in enormous
not.
amounts of electricity, and it's not designed that way. It's something that we've seen now in Belgium as well with the solar panel.
When the Belgian government basically promised its citizens that, hey, if you sell us back your energy, so you have solar panels on your home,
yes, yeah. Are you going to tell it or me?
you can tell it.
Okay, so basically the Belgian government
Sorry.
promised its citizens that when you have solar panels on your roof, you can sell back the extra electricity into the grid. But then they realized that their grid isn't strong enough to support that system in the long term, and more people were doing it. And then they said, oh, now you can't do this anymore. So a lot of people that calculated for those gains when buying the solar panels are now dealing with budgetary issues. I mean, of course, it's still beneficial to them to have solar panels, but they can't sell the energy back anymore. But this proved to us that the grid is not prepared to have this sort of two-way street yet.
But it also it's a proof of concept of having an interconnected grid where certain, like your individual house will produce enough energy that can be brought back to the grid and then redistributed in the most efficient way. It's possible. It's a proof of concept. And once the grid is more modernized, which is a lot of money.
Yes, of course, not doing that also costs a shit ton of money. So we are kind of, it seems to be the smarter way of doing things, pun not intended. To have a smart grid is the way forward, as it will also increase the efficiency of your energy production and usage. If every piece of that grid is in communication with each other, as is already demonstrated by like wind farms, in which
Definitely.
each single wind turbine
Some systems even have an AI thing going on where like where is the most needed part, and like it starts learning on its own, machine learning, where the system learns how to distribute the energy in the most efficient way.
So that's probably going to provide, as it already does, an economic bonus to countries that implement such a thing. Hence, it will become a dominant concept.
It is a bit of a future technology, though, what we're describing right now. It's a huge investment that will take more than, like, let's say Russia cuts off gas right now.
Oh, then we're fucked. But
We're not fucked. Relax. Don't catastrophize.
if they cut it off tomorrow, we are fucked.
No, they're also fucked.
Yet they are also fucked.
that's the
We are
thing.
collectively fucked.
It's a question of who lasts longer, right? They do the shitty thing. They're fucked. We're fucked for a while.
I mean, we'll probably
But,
last
like,
longer.
No. Like
There's-
as a European citizen, you're not really fucked. Like here's the thing. Let's say you have less natural gas tomorrow. First of all, we're reaching the summer. You do not need that much heating. Second of all, there are steps that you can take. Like if the heating is no issue, at least in these next 3 months, for the electricity manufacturing and for the electricity generation, you already have Germany doing so much more when it comes to green energy.
Yeah. And I mean, you would probably see the Americans, etc., step in because there is a geopolitical interest for them as well to really do this.
And even
it
the
would
OPEC countries,
take-
like we still have some fossil fuel going on.
Oh yeah,
Like,
we
I'm
would
so-
reopen every
Exact-
gas plant and every nuclear power.
Not necessarily. I don't think so. I mean,
Europe
nuclear
would.
is a different question.
Yes.
Germany is already like, hey, maybe we need this.
But geopolitics is an incredible motivator to do whatever the fuck you can.
Sure, but I think like this cuts both ways, right? The green agenda could also use the geopolitical incentives to push that we need renewable energy and we need to.
yes, certainly.
Yes. Actually,
Renewables, while they can be constructed in the short term very quickly, like a matter of months for
Yeah.
certain things, are still not going to immediately be a solution to the fact that we are in a geopolitical conflict with Russia at the moment, and they're not going to solve our dependency of that in this conflict.
but building new nuclear, for example, is impossible because it takes about
It's
10
literally
years
impossible.
Yes,
before a nuclear plant is
But
operational.
for example, the Belgian government, under the pressure of
Yes,
the
it's
current
keeping
conflict,
up
is
old-
keeping open old nuclear
there-
power plants, which it just seemed to be closing.
But there are a couple of things that we could do right now that could significantly aid the situation. And the
On a
internet.
consumer level.
No, also on a policy level, the International Energy Association has released
Right.
a list of things that they recommend the European governments do. Things like, I mean, first of all, obviously, do not get into more contracts with Russia about gas, so don't sign any new gas contracts. But also, like, replace Russian supplies with alternative sources. Introduce minimum gas storage obligations, which is something I didn't really think about before, but like you could store a certain amount of gas, which would decrease your
Yes.
immediate dependency. Accelerate the deployment of wind and solar, obviously, which could reduce gas use by over 6 billion cubic meters within a year. So that's like really short term. So, like there is a lot of, you could look up the article that they released.
The international,
They use the abbreviation IEA.
International Energy Agency.
Yeah, and the article is called "How Europe Can Cut Natural Gas."
Well, included in
Imports."
the description
Yes.
of the podcast. Look for that. Something like if you're wondering, maybe you're like, oh, but why can't we just get gas from somewhere else?
We can.
We can, but
Please don't.
I mean, here's the thing. Like, I get where you're coming from an environmental activist point of view, but at the same time, like, if you're talking here of meeting demand, it's interesting to point out that our deal with Russia when it comes to European mainland is just very efficient because we're transferring gas in its natural form through pipelines.
Yes,
if you're buying
we're
gas,
not putting it on a giant oil tanker and shipping it across the Atlantic like we would do.
You're not
if we
using
bought
energy to liquefy
stale
it and
gas.
make it like it is so efficient, that kind of
true.
gas. Like that's why there is this whole fucking thing of greenwashing gas, right? Natural gas, because it's like the reason it's greenwashed that way is because compared to much more compared to shipping gas from across the world in a liquefied tank, it is so much more efficient, and that's why it's much cheaper, and that means it's much more efficient than fossil fuel. So that's something that if you haven't thought about it, it's just like Nord Stream, and the reason why Germany wanted and Europe wanted Nord Stream 2 is because that efficiency of transferring gas between Russia and mainland Europe.
Yes, definitely.
And that's lost.
So I think we all agree that the solution would be heavily relying on renewable energy, maybe leaving nuclear plants open on the short term. It's better than opening new gas centrals.
I agree with that.
And getting an end to the conflict in general.
I mean, hey, an end
of course.
But even if you take worst case scenario, Russia can't really keep up its economy going without selling gas to somebody. They can sell to China.
What you said is very correct. In that sense, the gas connection between Western Europe and Russia is kind of also a version of mutually assured economic destruction. If they turn off the pipeline, they're also going to hurt.
We talked about it in the last episode with the interdependent economy.
Yes.
That's just the way it works. And if it's really like both countries are, both parties are, hey, like we're bluffing in the way we can outlast you, I think it's safe to say that mainland Europe has a bit of an edge there.
Yeah, definitely. Like let's take a deeper dive into how energy supply of a country and politics are intertwined, because I think there's a great video by CPG Grey also about how if a country is like very heavy in its oil exports, it can often go together with a more authoritarian regime because they don't have to rely on an economy that relies heavily on workers. It relies heavily on
It's not a service economy. Take Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates.
Exactly.
Their whole service sector is 80% foreign workers who are basically slaves.
Yes. So also Russia, right? Like Russia is a bit less extreme than Saudi Arabia in this, but the economy relies very heavily on gas, and that's how you get this sort of mutually assured destruction. That's even worse on Russia's side in a way, because they are so, like, Putin is Gazprom. Like, he's so reliant.
Gazprom?
Isn't that the name of the company?
Oh, I think it is. I'm just actually not sure. I just didn't.
Sure.
Yeah. I thought like you were calling him the Gazprom queen or something. Gazprom.
I mean, we can put it like that.
Like imagining
he's
Putin
the queen of the prom.
It's not wrong.
The Gazprom.
But yeah, so he's the queen of the Gazprom, and yeah, it's it creates a position where he has a lot of money. He's been he is the richest man alive when it comes to cash assets.
It's just like these cash assets, like you said, for the Russian Federation, for the Russian government. It's like, imagine if the United Arab Emirates would have no more oil ever. Now, for the Emirati citizen, they would be like, oh, shit, our government is actually extremely authoritarian and we don't have money anymore. What do we do? That's basically what you're talking about, right? It's the idea of if Putin can't sell gas to Europe anymore,
Exactly.
it will reach a point where the authoritarian what's the word? It's like the crushing.
If you don't have anything but
brute
bird
force
poop on rocks to go for your economy, you need to get value from something else. So your population needs to provide value. So they will probably have more of a say in what happens.
Yeah,
in
because even the Russian military and even the Russian strongmen that are actually like supportive of Putin, like how are you paying them? How are you feeding them?
Yeah, and it's really easy to crush people if all you need to do is protect a pipeline or protect a sort of oil drilling house, and like you have all the money coming from that one source. But if you want to like crush people and you need them to work, like you need
them
to
for the economy.
You need to build the country out to a higher standard of living.
Yeah, I think like I've heard some people call this whole thing, like if you really want to look at the best case scenario, it might be a catalyst for a more people-run Russia. Which
depends if you get rid of the giant gas exports, but the chances of that are low.
it's just a best case scenario reading. But it's not only the gas thing; it's also just like if just like this whole thing really bombs out for Putin, the authoritarian hold will, like, you already see it. They already kicked all of the media companies. The Russian people being arrested within Moscow there's a video of that every day, literally every day. The Russian national TV the national broadcast was interrupted by rogue journalists who condemned the war in Ukraine and walked off. This is literally unheard of. And the Russian astronauts in the International Space Station decided to go to their colleagues and wear yellow and blue outfits. But
none of those things are, if we're speaking in the most strict of power politics ways, none of those things harm his position.
But then you talk of the oligarchs and the people who actually have all of the money. They also
but the US is a populist oligarchy. Like they also have an enormous influence of their top company owners, of their top billionaires, and they do it with popular support. It's a different kind of oligarchy, but they also maintain it.
Of course.
Yeah, but if you want to do that, you can't be as autocratic and as crushing as Putin is being. And I think actually Russia is already, like, it's not like Saudi Arabia. It's not as crushing. It's not as clear division of you are the slaves and we are the... Sorry?
It's not an absolute monarchy like Saudi Arabia is. But
And in that sense, like, it's not democratic either. But in that sense, I think there is room for the Russian people to actually do some sort of revolution.
To get a softer bourgeois government.
Exactly.
And we are getting back to the previous episode's topic, basically, like talking about Russia again. Just to go back on topic, like with the energy thing, right? We're just like saying that this energy thing might be just one of the factors that might accelerate the, like, here's the thing. Every kingdom in the history, every empire, every strong dictator eventually falls. That is just the way it goes. Eventually the guy will die or he will be overthrown.
Yes.
And this might be an accelerator. The idea that Russia can't be selling gas to mainland Europe anymore.
I mean, the climate crisis is gonna do this.
Yes, that's also an accelerator.
Like, it's also gonna overthrow the Saudi government in the end. I mean,
can't wait to see that.
It's gonna happen. Like, if Europe
let's just
and
call
America,
it a government. It's actually a monarchy.
Yes.
Sorry,
that is true. Sorry.
Like,
monarchies have a government. Like
Fair enough.
King had.
Fair enough.
Like the French absolute monarchs had ministers.
Okay, let's not argue semantics. So it's gonna overthrow these people because they're so reliant on this, and it's gonna become worthless when nobody wants to use it anymore, and nobody
But
wants.
getting to that point where nobody wants to use it anymore is a bit more tricky, I believe.
Yeah.
But we have to get to that point within the next
So,
20 years.
Yes.
Do you both agree
That's,
that
of course, its own
like
issue.
it's a good thing that we're boycotting Nord Stream 1? Like obviously Germany and Hungary is like, no, we can't do that. We rely too much on it. But do you think in general?
Yeah, but Germany itself has also done it. Like Germany said that they're gonna stop the construction.
eventually.
Yes,
but not-
eventually they said
like
it.
they do not condone the idea of proposing sanctions on the current energy got from Russia.
Yeah, the current
No,
one.
and that's probably the
a bit too
smartest.
drastic?
I mean, it would be further escalation of the situation. But the truth is, they're also not willing to make systematic changes either. Like we
That is
still
true.
see a quite limited investment in certain projects. We still see the continuation of other fossil fuel projects. We still see this giant hydrogen bubble being propagated, which we talked about on this podcast earlier, in an earlier episode. So we're also not seeing full democratization of the energy production towards the general population. We're still seeing the same energy market systems in which energy is sold at
We're
like the
just
most
trying to
expensive
band-aid the whole
price.
thing to keep
Yeah,
it
exactly.
just like more band-aids.
So
And
there is a real opportunity to push for systemic changes in the entire
that's what we
way
should be
we do
pushing
energy.
for, I think.
But that's not what the current governments are doing.
No.
Probably because you still have giant players
And
like Exxon, like Total, who are, by the way,
Shell.
also using this opportunity to be hailed as heroes by pulling out of Russia.
not only that, they are making the most money in their
Oh, yes.
history.
Their stocks are through the roof.
They are the more like it's just insane. Like we talk about all of this shortages and like the benzene prices going up and all of this, but nobody's saying, hey, maybe what if like Shell doesn't make as much money? Like we look at France, the French government forced, I don't know the name of the company, but they've like it's a
the state-owned energy
the state-owned
company.
energy company. They forced them to
Yes.
sell at lower than market prices. Hey, what's the result? We made less money.
Oh no.
Why is that such a bad thing?
But
But
the
economic
capitalists,
growth.
Keenan.
We have to grow it at least
Like-
2% every year.
Personal profit, Keenan.
See, like I know like, I'm always the boring person who try to like point the direction of the conversation into like maybe capitalism is the problem.
It is.
But yeah, maybe the idea of making profit with exponential, endless, limitless growth is not the greatest thing in the world.
Yes.
And one more thing I want to mention is when it comes to systemic changes is the idea of election cycles, right? Our politicians make decisions and they also have the objective not only to rule the country and make it better, is to get re-elected.
Yes.
So when we talk about a 20 years old long-term solution plan, these politicians are like,
Yeah, we're lacking a bit in that department.
yeah, like they don't want to do that. Like I hate to mention nuclear as an example, but nuclear is one of these examples. Like one of the reasons why nuclear declined in popularity so much is it is such a long-term investment. It is extremely long-term. So compared to a gas plant or a gas refinement plant,
Instantly.
you can build it literally in 1 year and already make revenue. It is crazy. Not only profits wise, but also like political, hey, see what I did? I did things. Re-elect me. And I don't know how we like this is probably a topic for another
Also,
podcast.
nuclear is not a popular thing you
It
get
is
as a
just not
politician
popular.
because there is a constant fight of where are we going to put it because no municipality wants it,
Yeah.
let alone that any municipality would want the storage of the waste that comes along with it.
But even the investment in like the research, right?
Yes,
It's,
it's
like-
big, it takes a lot of money, it takes a long time to produce.
And
of
for
course,
a politician,
then
it is
has
not
certain
essence,
benefits.
and I think that's like a problem that we need to talk about. How do we incentivize
Yes.
politicians to actually rule in the best interest rather than I want to get re-elected?
In that sense, the European Union has been a bit of an alleviation since together with we see two blocks at the moment being very progressive on
Long-term plans.
on long-term plans in terms of energy, the energy transition. One is China, which of course can do that because it is run as a company. I mean, there is a top-level executive system
But
which
aren't they
says
communists?
this is what we need. Yes, communism is just a more efficient way of running a company, I would argue. And then the EU, it can't make decisions now for tomorrow, because it can make a decision today for tomorrow, because it would have to consult with all the heads of state. It would have to consult with its own parliament. It would have to blah, blah, blah. So it naturally makes decisions over a longer period of time, which coincidentally makes it so that, or inherently forces it to make decisions over a longer period of time to be meaningful in any way.
That is true. I think
a benefit.
it's a worthy argument of, like we said, we looked at Germany, we looked at Hungary, we looked at Austria. God, we rely so much on gas. So like we have these little different countries that have different plans of approach because they have different needs and different requirements. But when you have the EU as the entity that tries, hey, maybe we should look at this as a full entity, you get a much more coherent strategy.
Yeah, but for example, they have chosen the smart integrated grid as their master plan to work towards.
Is that going to be across Europe or like?
Yeah, that's a European strategy. Of course, what the EU always is lacking is
enforcement,
authority to a certain degree, and also resources to a certain degree. It doesn't take that much for all the complaints of right-wing politicians. The EU doesn't take that much of the national budgets of countries to be run.
And looking at that future that you're describing, how much time is left until we reach that?
I mean, in terms of ecological, necessity, we have about, at the current rate, a decade, less than, which of course the EU would have to amp up its action because it still has enough fossil fuel plants that are agreed upon, that are greenlit, basically, ready to be constructed in the drawer to blast us over that limit, to blast us over the budget we have. So those would need to be annulled. You would have to massively shift investments. You would have to up investments in general. But it could do it. I mean, if anything, the EU is at the moment, together with China, one of the most capable entities, seemingly.
When it comes to international policy, definitely.
As we all look sideways with blame at the USA, where not that much is happening.
I do. Can you imagine a world where the USA is not run by a couple of companies?
Yes.
Does it look nicer?
Yes.
I agree.
It also looks partially on fire to begin with, because I don't think those couple of companies would relinquish their power.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying imagine these companies going down. I'm saying imagine them not existing and never being allowed into the political system within the United States.
I was thinking of Amazonian warriors, as in Amazon's warriors in the middle of the Rust Belt.
But that's the thing, right? Do you need to go that far? Wouldn't it be enough to maybe make Amazon pay more than 0 taxes a year?
Oh yeah, definitely.
If you would just use that money to maybe invest in other infrastructure and a greener.
I'm not advocating for a conflict, an open conflict with Amazon, no. But you wouldn't need to do more, I believe, than tax it very heavily. You would need to change the power dynamics in society.
Yeah, but even in Europe, right, we have a lot of companies that have a lot of saying. The lobbying of gas companies, the lobbying.
Yes, very powerful lobby.
I know we as Europeans or as citizens of the EU are a lot of times look at the US and I'm like, look at what the US is doing. Such crazy shit, man. But I think it's prudent to realize that basically the US is an accelerated version of whatever we have here. Most of the time.
In some ways, yes. In other ways, it seems that the USA is not fully is not as hyped about the third industrial revolution at the moment. Probably because they have some domestic problems concerning their political system, etc.
Yeah, I think take for example the whole thing I mentioned about the election cycles, right? With how limited long-term plans can you make. If you take the US with its two-party system, it's you get elected, and for the next 4 years you need to get re-elected.
And you need to, in the US especially, it's very interesting because with the presidential system, you need the president and you need both chambers of the
Yes.
Congress in order to be able to do a
And
lot.
otherwise, it's like literally
Kind of-
gridlocks. Like,
yeah.
Like right now, Biden's government is basically almost useless because the Republicans control so much of the House.
I mean, you could still do a bit more, as we saw with like executive orders, etc. But there's also choosing not to.
Yeah,
which
I mean, definitely.
But yeah, that's the USA,
But yeah,
of course.
but I'm just like
But-
saying it's
The EU is a union which also is constantly looking to grow, which for the idea of like an energy network is an inherent benefit because
course.
you're looking to, you have an economic, or your structure is designed to integrate more other small networks into the larger
I
network.
mean, if we're talking like
That's an
contextualizing,
attitude.
like what is the utopia version of this whole thing? A global energy network
Yes.
where all of the resources of the Sahara Desert and the deserts in Texas and California and the wind turbines in the Netherlands. And
Yeah.
like it's one global connected
you
network.
could operate
right?
it as the wind patterns basically.
But-
If it needs to, you can slowly move energy in this direction if there is a low pressure point there.
And this
you
is absolutely-
Pointing to the right.
like to the left or to the north of the planet, to the south of the planet, depending on where you need
And
it.
this is absolutely impossible, basically, with our current like who's gonna be making the money out of this.
And in the short term, I think it's really important to make upping your own insulation and like these things on the small scale are also super important in order to make that
Let's
network.
rely less on gas.
And for those that can afford it, organize and demand your government sets up a third-payer system, or set
Yes.
up a third-payer
And, like-
system yourself.
Or like something like what the Italian government said, which we did,
Yeah,
which we
also a
said in the
great
beginning.
example.
Actually, what's also interesting to mention, even though they basically gave people free money because they gave them 110% of what they paid on their upping of energy efficiency, they still, in the GDP, even though there was also problems with corruption and there was problems with like other things, they still made money GDP-wise.
It
from
grows.
doing this.
The Italian
Jobs,
government made
actually.
money.
Yes.
More people are employed
created
in the renewable energy sector.
An insane amount of jobs. I forgot the exact number, but it was more than 100,000 jobs just because of this policy. And yeah, right now in Belgium, I don't even think you get any sort of financial incentive.
And not only that, we're also talking like a post-pandemic. Like, let's not forget, we are talking a post-pandemic economy here. We need something to incentivize the economy.
Exactly.
I'm not an economist, but I know that right now there's basically like, oh, what do you do? Oh, I work in IT. Otherwise,
Yeah, also, it's not like we have an overflood of people that are over ambitious about their jobs.
No,
we know that a
not
lot of people feel like they're not contributing anything to society, even though they have a job and they're getting paid for it.
Nobody wants to work
So,
anymore.
people do want to work. They
I
just don't
know.
want to.
It's a reference to Kim Kardashian being an asshole.
get off your ass and
Somebody
work.
made a joke like we should have a season of sweeping with the Kardashians where she is like a maid that has to
Yes.
clean people's houses and then she has to read quotes of herself all day.
I mean, do you remember that whole thing that was shown once on ContraPoint's channel with what Gigi something that goes to like, oh my god, is this a co-write? I've never
Gigi
been
Gorgeous.
Gigi Gorgeous,
Yes.
like the really rich person who for the first time goes to a supermarket.
Yeah. Like
is
the
crazy.
internet is a strange place.
It is. It is.
Okay, so let's maybe end this episode on what should we now do? Should we protest? to
I mean,
get
yeah, you as an
these-
individual, like you said, like, here's the thing: on an energy consumption level and on like gas consumption levels, as an individual, you can think of next year. Next year, when the winter comes, it's better to have an insulated house. Obviously, this is not something easy. You can't just move out of your apartment. You're probably a renter. Our target audience is probably just broke students.
To be fair, rental apartments are usually much better
That
in
is
their
true.
energy consumption because the other apartments around you also warm your apartment.
Yeah, and something I'm gonna steal also from the International Agency of Energy. It's the idea of how much more energy efficient we are when it comes to working from home. In the pandemic, working from home
Yes.
proved that it is such a save of fossil fuel and oil and gas to just stay home. So
Yeah, so like work from home at least 3 out of 4 days. If you have workers that work for you, maybe.
here's a crazy idea. Maybe instead of a 5 working week, let's have a 4 days working week.
That sounds like socialism, Keenan.
Yeah, like.
Do you want the economy to plummet entirely?
Switzerland have a Sunday car-free Sundays, which saves them a lot of energy.
Yeah, also. This is, I mean,
yes.
energy is, of course, the basis of the entire society. Almost. So
Like
you,
this,
so many things. Like,
you could focus on natural gas, but in the end, this is just about the way
Also-
we get energy.
Yeah,
Yes.
and also like vote for people that want to make trains and night trains and long distance trains much more
Public
accessible.
transportation.
Because we want to travel cheaply without having to take a plane. We, as the young people of Europe, I think a lot of us want to have that in the future.
Yeah. I mean,
So-
like something like if we want to get into our personal lives, I've gotten a car recently, and it's just like it's so much easier to get around. And that doesn't mean that I support more cars. It just means that it just proves that our current transportation system is you either get a car or you're fucked.
Yes.
You do not have the fast and efficiency.
and even
of-
with a car, you're partially fucked because you're in traffic. So it's just less fucked.
Way less fucked, Tom. Trust me.
Yes,
Like,
yes,
It's just so much more efficient to get whatever you want to go, and I think that's bullshit. I don't think you should be either getting a car or I guess I'm gonna waste 2 hours in the train because our train network, our tram network, our public transportation network is just not designed to be large scale, and like our main way of transporting people is cars, and that
Yes.
should just change.
Yes.
Also for goods, it should also be a much more heavy.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but
reliance
if you're
on
gonna
trains.
regulate the street for one thing, it's probably trucks. Like supply chains are just gonna be relying on trucks.
Yeah, and then also it's the question, okay, how do these trucks run? Is it gonna be electric? Is it gonna be hydrogen? Is it gonna
And
be...
on such long distances, the technology is still not there. It's gonna be benzene as it is right now. But like if
Still
you-
better than planes, you know?
definitely better than planes. And we also like the idea of think about the idea of, hey, maybe we use less energy. Like maybe as a population, we just use less energy. And that's something that can happen if the demand is not being met. If the European governments fail to find a substitute for the Russian gas and the Russian government decide to stop giving us gas, like if you follow that thread, okay, we use less energy. And that's usually not a very good thing. Like you might think, oh, that's great then. We're using less energy. But it's usually accompanied by damp economies, economic crises, depressions.
Yes, I think it's important to be willing
But you should be
To-
willing, yeah.
to not let something like the Russian government control you. But there was this action of a couple of Germans who turned off their lights for an hour to show that they would rather turn off their lights for an hour every day than to have like new gas centrals pop up. But it's not the best solution because it will also harm low-income people, etc. Okay, thank you for listening, everyone, and we will see you next week.
Yes, we'll see you next week. Have a very good, I don't know, whatever you're listening to. Don't forget to subscribe.